The hallways of St. Jude's Academy were usually filled with the chaotic symphony of slamming lockers and teenage chatter, but for 17-year-old Elias, the world was silent except for the rhythmic thumping of his own heart. In his breast pocket sat a cream-colored envelope. It wasn't just paper, it was a confession. The illusion of kindness. Elias was a quiet boy, the kind who faded into the beige paint of the classroom walls. That was until he entered Miss Sterling's English literature class. Unlike the other teachers who barked orders, Miss Sterling spoke with a melodic softness. When Elias struggled with his essays, she stayed behind, her hand resting briefly on his shoulder as she pointed out a misplaced comma. "You have a beautiful soul, Elias," she had said once, after he turned in a poem about the autumn leaves. "You see things others miss." To a boy starved for validation, those words were a spark in a dry forest. He began to track her every move. She smiled at him when he walked in. That must be a sign. She gave him an A on a paper he knew was mediocre. "She's favoring me." He mistook professional empathy for a hidden, burning passion. He convinced himself that her kindness was a coded invitation, a secret language only the two of them spoke. The proposal. On a raining Tuesday, after the final bell rang, Elias lingered. The classroom smelled of chalk dust and Miss Sterling's lavender perfume. He approached her desk, his palms slick with sweat. "Miss Sterling?" he whispered. She looked up, brushing a stray hair from her forehead. "Yes, Elias. Do you need help with the Milton reading?" "No," he said, his voice trembling. He pulled out the letter. I think we don't have to hide it anymore. I know how you feel. I feel it too." Miss Sterling's brow furrowed as she took the envelope. As she read, the color drained from her face. The letter was a fever dream of adolescent longing, proposing that they elope after graduation and confessing that he knew her smiles were promises of a life together. The harsh reality. The silence that followed was deafening. When she finally looked up, the warmth Elias had worshipped was gone, replaced with a cold, sharp steel. "Elias," she said, her voice dropping an octave, "this is not just inappropriate, it is delusional. I am your teacher. My job is to be nice to you because you are a student, not because I am your suitor." "But the way you look at me," Elias started, his world beginning to crumble. "I look at you with the concern of an educator," she snapped, standing up. "You have crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed." She didn't report him to a counselor. She reported him to the Dean of Discipline, Mr. Thorne, a man whose reputation was built on the sting of a rattan cane. In that school, gross disrespect and moral turpitude were met with the old-fashioned rod. The price of a heartbeat. The walk to the dean's office felt like a march to the gallows. Miss Sterling stood by the door, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. No longer the muse, but the accuser. Mr. Thorne didn't waste words. "A student who confuses kindness for a license to insult a lady's profession deserves a reminder of where the boundaries lie," he growled. The punishment was set, 24 strokes. The first stroke was a shock of white-hot line of fire across his backside that stole his breath. By the 6th, his eyes were stinging with tears of shame, not just pain. By the 12th, the romantic fog had completely evaporated, replaced by the cold, hard reality of his own humiliation. Each stroke was a rhythmic correction to his fantasy. Whack, she doesn't love you. Whack, you are a child. Whack, kindness is not a contract. The aftermath. When it was over, Elias stumbled out of the office, his legs shaking. He saw Miss Sterling walking toward the parking lot in the distance. She didn't look back. She didn't check to see if he was okay. He realized then that the love he had felt was a house of cards he had built himself. She hadn't been his soulmate. She had just been a person doing her job, and he had set fire to the only bridge of kindness he had. He walked home in the rain, the physical sting of the cane already fading into the much deeper, permanent ache of a lesson learned the hardest way possible.
5 years later, the echo of the cane. The fluorescent lights of the university library hummed, a sound that usually helped Elias focus. Now 22 and a graduate student in psychology, he sat at a mahogany desk, his posture perfectly straight. Even years later, he rarely slumped in a chair. His body seemed to remember the phantom sting of a boundary crossed. He was grading freshman essays, ironic, he often thought, when he came across a paper that felt uncomfortably familiar. The student had used flowery, over-earnest language, praising Elias's unique insight and supportive nature in the margins. Elias stopped breathing for a second. He remembered the lavender perfume and the way he had once misinterpreted a hand on a shoulder as a life-altering vow. The chance encounter. A week later, while attending an educational conference in the city, he saw her. Miss Sterling, now Mrs. Vance, according to her badge, was standing by the coffee station. She looked older, her sharp features softened by time, but that same professional poise remained. His first instinct was to turn and run. The shame of those 24 strokes and the memory of his tear-stained face in the dean's office felt like it happened yesterday. But he forced his feet to move forward. "Miss Sterling?" he said quietly. She turned, squinting for a moment before recognition clicked. "Elias? Elias Thorne? No, Elias from St. Jude's." "Just Elias," he smiled weakly. "I'm finishing my master's now." The unspoken apology. The air between them was heavy with the ghost of that rainy Tuesday. They spoke of mundane things, his thesis, her new position as a department head. But the elephant in the room was a cream-colored envelope and a rattan cane. "I wanted to say," Elias began, his voice steady for the first time in years, "that I understand now. I spent a long time being angry about the punishment, but I spent longer being embarrassed by my own head. I mistook your humanity for a romantic invitation because I didn't know the difference." She looked down at her coffee, her expression softening into something genuine. Not the cold steel of the office, but the kindness he had once adored. "I was young too, Elias," she admitted. "The punishment was harsh. It was the school's way, not mine. But I had to be the wall you hit, or you would have never learned where you ended and others began." The final lesson. They didn't become friends. They didn't grab a drink. They shared a polite nod and walked in opposite directions. As Elias walked toward the exit, he realized the pain was finally gone. The love he'd felt wasn't a tragedy. It was a growing pain. He realized that true maturity wasn't just about controlling your heart. It was about respecting the boundaries of someone else's. He sat in his car, adjusted his seat, and felt no sting, only the quiet, solid weight of a man who finally understood the world as it was, not as he wished it to be.